Welcome to the Pipeline and People podcast powered by Versorix, the show where boutique firm leaders trade less admin for more advisory. Each week, we share actionable tactics to keep your client pipeline full and your team performing at its best. I'm your host, Jaden Parisi. Let's dive in. Today's guest is Michael Nelson, founder and master key holder at Keymaker, a consulting and tech studio helping organizations around the world scale smart with software, operations, and marketing that actually deliver. Michael, welcome. Could you kick us off with a quick look at your background and what led to you going full-time on Keymaker?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. So my name is Michael. I began my career in B2B tech sales, working at companies like Lemonade, a YC startup, as one of their founding BDRs, and then at Google. So all of these roles, the one thing they all have in common is they're all software companies. And being kind of like a go-to-market person, I didn't get a lot of exposure to the product and engineering side. So while I was still working, I built my first ever web app using Bubble, a no-code technology. And it was an app that connects aspiring founders to potential investors. So within a few months, it grew to about 100 users and was just implementing product feedback and figuring out like how to actually build a product, even though it's not with, a traditional, like, let's say, Next.js tech stack or something that's, traditional coding. Using visual programming languages is still very much a skill, and building a product is very much its own skill in its own right. And so that's something I learned the hard way, but fell in love. So left Google, started Keymaker about 2.5 years ago now, and yeah, I'm still kicking.
Awesome. I have to ask, your title on LinkedIn is Master Key Holder, which is a unique one. Is that like a play on words? What does it represent for you?
It is a bit of a play on words. So the reason why it's called Keymaker was because of the Keymaker from the Matrix franchise. So he is introduced in the Matrix Reloaded. He is basically an exiled program who helps them to create shortcuts. So he knows like all of the back doors to the programs and stuff like that to help the heroes navigate the Matrix. And so uh, I figured that what we try to do is to do very much the same for businesses, but on the software side of things. So I don't know if it's as cool as helping Neo and Morpheus, but I like to think that it is.
For sure. That's awesome. All right. So let's dive in. Who does Keymaker serve right now? What type of projects do you love doing the most?
Great question. So I'm going to start with projects, then work back to who we work with. So I would say most of our work falls into one of two buckets. So fundamentally, it's mostly web apps. So these, for those who don't know, you have different types of apps. You have, let's say, like mobile apps, so something that you can download from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. And then you have web apps, which are basically like websites, but they have a database feeding it into it, and a lot more complex features, so like login and sign up. So for example, if you've ever gone on x.com, that's an example of a web app. And so most of the work that we do is web apps. And then of those, I would say they fall into one of two categories. There are what I call like external facing tools, which are typically MVPs, minimum viable products. So these are folks who either want to, it's usually like an aspiring founder or maybe an aspiring team. They want to build some form of like a white label solution, or they want to get their business started with some form of like a SaaS or product offering. And then the other bucket is an internal tool. So these are typically slightly larger companies that are more established, and they want something that is bespoke for them. So then maybe they want like a custom client portal that links to their ERP system, or like a custom ticketing system or something like that. So in terms of who we work with, as you can imagine, this applies to pretty much anybody who has software embedded in their business. So part of what I am working on right now is defining exactly who I want to work with and kind of niching down. And yeah, I'm still in the process of figuring that out and validating my ICPs.
Yeah, and that's great. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. But first, I just wanted to ask, I saw a recent post that you made on LinkedIn about just a wild RFP. They wanted a crazy MVP in no time for no money. I just wanted to know what ended up happening with that.
Yeah, so they didn't respond. This is the
Oh,
short answer,
of
but
course.
it's it's actually really, really common. And I think part of it stems from it's like I forget what it's called, but there's a diagram out there which is like if you're trying to learn something for the first time, it's a new skill. Usually what ends up happening is before you start, you're like, I don't know anything about this. So like let's say you want to learn how to surf or how to ride a bike for the first time. You're like, oh, it's just riding a bike, can't be that hard. And then as you begin to learn, your confidence begins to dwindle and you're like, okay, there's a little bit more to it than I initially realized. And that's definitely the case with software, to where in this day and age where you have AI tools, you have a lot of very I'll call them ambitious founders, where they're saying, okay, we have these AI tools that can generate these, amazing like web apps or designs within seconds. Like, how hard can it be if I hire a developer? So sometimes you'll get kind of a little bit of reframing that goes on when you receive a request like that, where they're like, okay, if I throw like a couple $1,000s at it and I give them a couple of weeks, should be no biggie. Like they're a professional developer,
Yeah.
and they just don't have the full picture yet, which is fine. It happens, but I would say it's very common in the software world. Not sure for other types of agencies, but something I see pretty regularly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so yeah, you mentioned you're deciding whether to niche. Walk us through your current thinking. What's exciting about it? What's holding you back? Where are you thinking of heading?
Yeah. So I think part of it stems from, and I've spoken to other software agency owners as well, and I think the initial hurdle is saying, okay, what we offer can apply to anybody. So, do we sell to everybody? And then if not, what do we end up doing? And so I've noticed that for the folks who've been in the game a little bit longer, it tends to be that the agency founder just has a network in a particular area, or maybe they worked in an industry before they started their agency. And so they have a slight advantage, and it just so happens that it's almost like confirmation bias. So they end up talking to more people in that particular industry. They end up making more sites or more products in that industry. And then they kind of like fall into the niche. Of course, there are a lot of folks who are very intentional about it. But at the end of the day, that's why you see a lot of platforms like Make or sorry, not Make, Fiverr or Upwork that get very crowded because it's kind of like spray and pray to where like I can technically help anybody. So how do I choose who to work with? For me, where that's coming from is I understand that because I have that go-to-market background, you can't go to someone, send them a cold email or pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I do technology stuff. Like, wouldn't that be great if I could just work with you on technology stuff? Because
Yeah.
they're going to be like, all right, this is some random guy, you know, doing whatever. I don't even know. So you need to come with a proper offer, something specific, whether it's a deliverable or a specific service or just a problem really that you're going to solve for them. And I think that there's also a surprising amount of research that goes into that if you don't have that industry experience. And so right now I'm looking at a few different industries and trying to figure out like where those gaps are. And my process, at least right now, is saying, okay, I have an initial hypothesis of a potential solution for this type of company within an industry. Let me look at what softwares they're probably already using. So who are the major vendors in that area? And then are there any product gaps? So are there any features that are either inaccessible for that particular ICP? So for example, let's look at e-commerce. You have platforms like WooCommerce and Shopify and all these other great platforms. And a lot of folks will try to talk to small like CPG companies who are selling on Shopify, being like, why don't you want to leave Shopify? These rates are so high. But at the end of the day, you're talking to a company that sells like a dozen products a week. So they're not doing the volume to where 3% is going to be killing them. You want to be
Yeah.
talking to a larger company to where now it's like in the tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're willing to make a switch for the right price. So trying to figure out the economics of it and then also the product gaps in there has been something I've been kind of interested in and taking a stab at. All that is to say, it's a lot more work than I originally thought, but I think it's going to inform my outbound process a lot.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people will say that, it's about sales 100%. But if you nail down your targeting and you have an offer for what these people want, they will buy it, right?
That's the hope.
So
I
where
haven't, I haven't, I
you,
haven't validated it, but in the sales, in my past sales life, that's 100% how it works. Yeah.
yeah. So what are you thinking of as far as, specifically what niche you wanna, or do you not have any thoughts yet?
I want to try manufacturing first. So
Okay.
yeah. And how I came about this was I really like unsexy industries where there's not a lot of innovation because I see that there's a lot of headroom for that. The risk is that it's more unproven. So you have to think through, like my thought process is, all right, is there a reason why they haven't adopted technology for a specific problem? Is it because either one, it's just not viable, like from an economic perspective, from the vendor side, or two, is it just really not necessary? And so I'm trying not to over-engineer it. But what I'm looking at right now is one of two things. So there's a trend of like building smart websites. This is more so on the web dev side of things, where people who build like Webflow and Framer sites are reaching out to local businesses, being like, "Hey, your website sucks. Like, don't wouldn't it for my service if you just landed like 1 or 2 leads in a month from this, would it make sense for me to give you a free sample?" So I'm thinking maybe do something similar to that, but maybe with some like AI types of integrations, making it a proper web app, the booking form, and more advanced features. And then the second offer that I'm brainstorming right now is a customer portal. So I noticed that a lot of ERPs that specifically are targeting like job shops and independent manufacturers in the US don't have anything really customer facing. It's all for internal management. So things like, hey, like which assembly machine is being less like underutilized, basically. Or like how are we managing the shop floor rather than how do we manage the intake process and how do we work with customers? So it's something that I'm looking into right now. Just like, is it technologically feasible? Is there demand for it? Why don't these ERP systems include that kind of a modular feature? That's where my head's at right now. So we'll see. Maybe it ends up drawn blank, but I could.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good industry. I have a couple connections in that industry, and I know some people that are still like in their warehouses and stuff, still doing all of their tracking and invoicing like pen and paper.
Manually.
There's definitely opportunity there. It's just, can you capture it?
There you go. Maybe you can make some interest for me.
For sure. So then 12 months from now, what would a clear and confident positioning look like for you?
Yeah. So I would say being a bit of a thought leader in an industry and really just like a trusted partner. Nobody wants someone to just come and do a job and kind of be done. I'm forgetting his name right now off the top of my head, but there is a great, he writes for freelancers. But he talks about how there are basically 3 types of developers or like agencies that you can work with. There is a fixer, there is a technician, and then there's a robot. The robot is the person where you just like do X, Y, and Z. They do X, Y, and Z, nothing else. The technician is somebody who might say, okay, you're doing X, Y, and Z so that you can accomplish, this type of outcome. Maybe instead of doing X, Y, Z, we do A, B, C, and it'll get you to the outcome without spending as much. And then you have someone who's like the fixer, where instead of just trying to figure out the outcome, it's like, okay, do you have, instead of just building like this web app, for example, like what's the business outcome that you're trying to achieve? Like, what is the significance of this? Why are you trying to build this? Oh, like I'm trying to generate leads or I want a lead magnet. Okay, well, instead of trying to build out this whole web app, why not just start with a landing page, right? And then so it's going to cost you a lot less money. I'm not going to have to spend as much time and resources in this project. You're going to be way happier, which is going to be great for me. I can get a killer review. And so you should always basically aim to be the fixer. And I want to be that for an industry. So I want to be someone that people can come to being like, hey, maybe I do actually need more customer facing functionality, but it's really just a holistic like technology partner that people can come to and rely on and not have to worry like I'm going to be $5,000 in the hole. Michael did a great job, Keymaker did a great job building his product for me, but now it's actually not a fit for my business. What do I do?
And what needs to happen, operationally or strategically to support that transition?
For me right now, I think it's growing headcount. So I've done this as a freelancer by myself before, and it's always a chicken and egg problem between making money and working on projects and then selling more business. And it's tough to be able to grow at a pace that's going to, develop those case studies and, have time for content and marketing. So I'm in the process of hiring. I just hired 2 people. They're starting next week, which is really awesome. So one person to help me on development, one salesperson. And so really, I'm just looking to hit the ground running and see if I can, balance both at the same time. So working with clients, making them super happy, and then also spending the time and dedicating the energy and resources to see if I can validate an ICP and grow within a niche.
Sure. Do you have any sort of plan in place for that? Like yesterday, I spoke with this guy who runs a very large business. They work with founders and CEOs of companies making 1 to 30 million a year, and he helps scale them. And it was very clear, like he's like the foundation for scaling, and kind of taking a step back is track everything, have a plan, follow the steps of that plan. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. So I think more so, I'm biased because again, I come from a go-to-market background, so I understand kind of what the sales inputs need to be and what those KPIs should be. So for the salesperson, it's less so. I mean, one's going to be outbound volume, but also meetings booked. So it's just, hey, if you can get someone on the phone and you can convince them like we have an offer that's going to work for you, let's have a conversation about it. I think that's probably the number one thing to be tracking, at least for them, because it's mostly just outbound their role. And then on the developer side, I would say billable hours is going to be huge. So that said, I do want to bake in some secondary KPIs. I think it's more so a task for the future, but I want to build in some growth for the developer. A lot of agencies and developers I've spoken to in my industry specifically, there's a lot of turnover. So it's not for lack of skill, because there's a lot of great talented no-code developers out there right now. The problem is that they don't have this space. There's not enough margin for any error or learning. It's just like, I need this person to do this one specific thing, and they need to do it like with as little oversight as possible. And what I want is not just contractors coming in like with a revolving door. I want someone that is going to understand the way that we do things, understand how to, maybe not even how to talk to the clients, but understand, like, anticipate client needs. And I think that's just something they're going to learn over time. So I want to build that kind of learning in, because I want this to be a long-term relationship that pays dividends.
Yeah, for sure. Pivoting a little bit back to a niche, how much of your hesitation is tied to identity? Meaning, like, if I niche, I'm saying no to all of these people, or is that not a concern for you?
It's definitely a concern. It's scary because I think try to be practical about it as much as I can, in the sense to where, like, what I'm doing right now to prepare for validating for the ICP is to build a pipeline outside of the ICP, so that I have the right amount of leverage to be able to say no, at least for a little while. I think that because I have turned down business before in pursuit of something, let's say, better, or, in line with a specific strategy that I had. And the problem with it is you're going into it with some sort of blind risk and some blind faith, to where you're like, hey, this is completely unproven. I have an idea. I'm going to basically risk it all, which isn't a smart thing to do. Don't do that. Don't make my mistake, because you can't, you need to pay the bills first and foremost. And if you're going to be, I think the number one responsibility is for the business to survive, because if you don't survive, you're never going to test that ICP anyway. So what's the point? You're not going to help all these great people build the technology solutions that they need. So I would say first comes survival. So building the pipeline now, so that way, I don't need to worry about saying no, at least for the first month. And then we can test this on a rolling basis. And then if after 1-2 months, I'm in the middle of these new projects, I still haven't been able to validate this ICP, I can either test a new solution for the same type of company, or I can move on. And at least that's how I think is the most practical way for me to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people will put themselves in a cage and not realize that they can just, pivot, try new, test something new, test a different niche. And that's a big thing when, trying to niche down, is you might not get it right your first time, and that's fine. But once you find it, stick with it.
Yeah. And that's the big reason why I want to, is because I understand there's a certain repeatability to it. Right now, when there is no niche, like I said, it's very much spray and pray, and you can't systematize it, right? You can't build a playbook around that. What you can build a playbook around is knowing exactly who you're selling to, because then you can check out, their watering holes. Are they in Facebook groups? Are they in different online communities? You can target them more specifically. Your lead lists are going to be a lot cleaner and easier to work with. You just start to hit all of these economies of scale, basically, in the operations side of things, that you're not going to be able to otherwise. So that's why at this stage, I'm like, I need a niche. Let me be like super awesome in this one area, and then maybe I can expand, right? Maybe I end up pivoting away. But I think in terms of being able to save time and save clients money, it's going to help a lot if I niche down now.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we've got a few minutes left here. We're gonna move on to just a little thing we do at the close of every episode. We're gonna do a quick rapid fire, right? So, quick 20, 30-second answers, just whatever's on the top of your head. Starting off, what's the biggest myth you've found about niching?
Biggest myth about niching, that it doesn't pay off, because it definitely does. I think the biggest myth is they think it doesn't pay off because they haven't been able to validate or penetrate the niche. And that's not necessarily a sign that the philosophy doesn't work. It's normally a matter of execution.
Okay, great. What's one mindset shift that helped you grow in the last year?
Being less afraid to try new things. So being able to push myself out of my comfort zone, do things a little bit differently, and be more ambitious for myself and take bigger bets.
Yeah, you recently committed full time to Keymaker, right? So what was there a moment that was like, yeah, now's the time? What
I
sparked
think it
that?
was more, yeah, I mean, I think it was just enough is enough. Let's go for it.
Okay, fair enough. And then finally, a lesson from your time at Google that still shapes how you build today.
I would say it's more so on the people side. So Google has a phenomenal culture. It's not all beanbag chairs like people probably think it is, but the way that they interact with people and the way that they, at least in my office and my division, I know that there are layoffs in big tech. Can't speak to that. Um, but just the interview process was seamless. The amount of attention given to junior talent is truly remarkable. So I want to be able to invest, maybe not as equally, but as much as I can in who I bring to the team, because I'm hoping it's going to pay off in the long run.
For sure. All right, Michael, thank you. This was a fun, thoughtful convo. Where can listeners learn more about you and or Keymaker and follow what you're building?
Absolutely. Head to our website, keymaker.studio. We have a blog there, and if we post any content, we'll be sure to post any links there.
Okay, great. If today's chat sparked any ideas, share this episode, tag Michael with your biggest takeaway. Until next time, I'm Jaden, and this is the Pipeline of People podcast.